Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the concluding session of the 8th International Conference of Global Citizenship Education. I'm Na-kyung Lee, Program Specialist at the Asia Pacific Center of Education for International Understanding. It is my pleasure to moderate the final round of the conference. Now we have come to the conclusion of the program. Thank you all for your invaluable contributions and for staying with us all the way to the end. Before we start closing, as we are not able to participate in all the concurrent sessions and meet some of the interesting discussions. So I would like to invite 3 rapporteurs and hear key discussions points from each session. First, I would like to invite Professor Aaron Benevit, who will share his report on concurrent sessions 1.1, 2.3, and 3.2. Professor Benevit, you have the floor.
So I have the impossible task of trying to summarize in 4 minutes, and I've already taken 30 seconds, 3 engaging, fascinating, probing sessions that I had the great fortune of attending today. The first one in the morning was a session that was the representation of 3 of the countries that are currently involved in integrating global citizenship education in Lao PDR, in Ghana and Bhutan. These are countries in which the government is fully committed to trying to find ways of integrating the idea, the concept into their national curricula. We heard about the journeys that these countries have been engaged in over the last 2 or 3 years through various kinds of preparatory work, situation analysis, mapping the curriculum, finding ways to integrate the topic into their curriculum. There's differences, even though the process in part was very similar, but many differences about which level they decided to do or focus the integration, the ways, the different stakeholders that they were engaged with, and many of the questions of the audience revolved around issues of assessment on the one hand, and the question about the sustainability of the reforms that are being undertaken once the funding subsides or concludes. I thought that the remarks of the moderator were also very interesting about the ways in which these countries didn't know the answers to what they wanted to do from the beginning, but rather engaged in a very open-ended process that allowed for flexibility as they moved through the reform. So that was the first session that I attended in the morning. I'm now going to jump to the third session that we heard from 3 very active, passionate individuals. One is the manager of an NGO in Malaysia, another is a teacher here in South Korea, and the third is involved in Japan and the Philippines. In each of these, we see engaged individuals who are involved in community partnerships, involved in enabling teachers to do their best in developing global citizenship education pedagogies, a lot of innovative ideas, fascinating session. And the third session, because the time has run out, is the session that I participated in with my colleagues who are involved in monitoring and evaluating global citizenship education. We heard it at 3 different levels. At the national level in terms of South Korea, in terms of the Asia-Pacific region, and then at the global level, a lot of interesting conversation, many challenges, a lot of interesting discussion, and I thank very much our moderator, Professor Kerr, for facilitating that. And with that, I will close.
Thank you, Professor Benevit. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Natia Natchivli-Shivli, who will share discussions of concurrent sessions 1.3, 2.1, and 3.3. Please welcome Ms. Natia Natchivli-Shivli.
I'm the one who shared this impossible task with Aaron, which was mentioned before, because it's absolutely impossible to mention about everything which was said during these 3 amazing, absolutely inspiring sessions. But I decided to share with you 3 takeaways from each sessions. So, first session, 1.3, was about pre-service teacher education programs. And it was discussed that it's crucially important to invest in global citizenship education, because if it's a luxury thing for some countries, for other countries it's the way to survive. And if any country or anybody is failed, this will have its effect for everybody's life. So it's important to go this way. And also it was mentioned that global citizenship education is about taking actions, and exactly about everybody's action. And we have to act today, now, and not tomorrow or after tomorrow. And we discussed that it's important to prepare actors for that actions and to build very inclusive, absolutely inclusive environment where everybody can take an action and everybody can be responsible for his or her actions. Another session was about competencies for educators, and it was discussed that global citizenship education is something to be done, or we need to do it even if it's not officially or nationally formally launched in some countries. Because if we are doing something locally, with our local initiatives, we can initiate global changes. So we don't have to wait for anybody, or for political decisions or for others' guidance. So we have to act. Also, we learned that empathy is not something like a soft skill, and we agreed that it's very hard, very strong, and very powerful skill. And if we are not empathetic, bright and shiny parts are coming up. But if we are not, we are losing students' voices. And without students' voices, education systems cannot improve. And very rich, very lovely, and inspiring experience was shared by panelists who talked about APSA youth development, how it started, what was done. And it was mentioned that even if many interesting and many useful and inspiring lessons are shared right now, there are some challenges. And one of these challenges is that we are doing some things without knowing what happens after. What happens after trainings? What happens after capacity building programs? But it seems that we are trusting and we are continuing doing this. And last session was about innovation, innovative practices. And it was proudly mentioned that what we need is having a good questions, because we already have good answers. It was mentioned that a reference framework for competencies for democratic culture contains every possible good answer what we need for implementation of global citizenship education. And it was very nicely and kindly shared online campus of APSEU with diverse online courses and multimedia resources, like an innovative tools to implement global citizenship education. And finally, we played. If global citizenship education is about active citizenship, we practice to be active. We practice to experience how we can value some things. And also we practice the most complicated part of the global citizenship. And here in this room, we played to experience every possible emotion which can be experienced by global citizens. So that's all from my side, and I believe I could not cover many things, but believe me, all 3 sessions were extremely, extremely inspiring and interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shibuli. Last but not least, Mr. Umair Meshtaq will summarize concurrent session 1.2, 2.2, and 3.1. Mr. Meshtaq, you have the floor.
So standing in the same line with the most difficult task. Session 1.2, GCED as lifelong learning. In that session, youth advocates and leaders from around the globe shared their projects. Nominma from Mongolia talked about how she developed a manual, very well-researched based manual which actually talked about digital literacy, and how she shared that she reached to 6 million Mongolians through digital engagements through her program. And also in that panel, Iniluva from Nigeria shared his project where he was fostering, he was focusing on responsibility, agency, and competency using film as a medium. And this project aimed to demonstrate peaceful coexistence between Muslim and Christian communities impacting over 100,000 people. It was very interesting. And then we have Haeun Sok, our South Korean panelist. She has a 7-year of implementation of GCED at the local government level. They established the Seonggu Global Academy for Women, integrating environmental, human rights, and energy education into practical initiatives. Their success was attributed to swift understanding of the educational direction and effective use of non-formal education. It was a great discussion and followed by a question answer from the audience where they asked like what were the challenges they faced in their own communities. Interesting talk. Now the second session, 2.2, Youth as Change Agents. I was also part of that panel discussion. We started, the moderator, Mr. Dolan, started with very interesting way, by introducing that it was a dynamic panel, and we started with the Violeta Ramirez presentation, her project on peace building in early childhood in Colombia. She shared that 30% of victims of armed conflict and children and adolescents. So it was very challenging for her to start with that conditions. And she shared that following 2016 peace agreement, the government introduced Cátedra para la Paz, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, a mandatory academic program aimed at promoting peace education. She shared that teachers face challenges due to high student numbers and a lack of educational alignment. Her contribution was amazing through her project in that. So the next was Umair Mushtaq, who shared his art-based transformative education. Yeah, so her art-based transformative work, leveraging art mediums to promote education and social values in Pakistan. We firmly believe in the unique space that art provides for individuals to dream, explore, and learn. After the two of us, a very interesting project from Lindsay Nyabreka, founder of GCED for Zimbos in Zimbabwe, a youth-led project to empower youth and women, emphasizing sustainable development and global citizenship. She believed the core values include grassroots engagement, empathy, and Ubuntu. It was interesting a term coined in that discussion. So it was interesting conversation between and followed by question answers. Quickly, I think I'm getting late into that. So the third, it was a storytelling workshop for transformative learning by Lisa Wan. A very interesting workshop. She started with questions like, what is transformational learning? Why stories are important, and how the chemicals work in our brain in the building of story and connecting with the audience. It was interesting. She shared that stories engage our brains, triggering memory, logic, and emotion. Lisa talked about dopamine, oxytocin, and cortisol, and how these chemicals work, and how some combinations drive the narrative toward a happy ending, creating a shift in the audience's perspective. And she continued the discussion with audience how neural coupling makes storytelling a social activity, forming a connection between the teller and the listener. So it was very interesting workshop which engaged the audience, raised questions, and then the audience actually talked about and connected and also felt that how it's important to have a story while working in our own domains. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mushtaq. And once again, thank you all the rapporteurs for sharing fruitful discussion and also for successfully accomplishing the impossible task. Now we move on to the closing. Over the last 2 days, we discussed priorities of education in the era of multiple crises and shared efforts to practice transformative education, tackling challenges in their respective settings. We also revisited the concept of GCED competencies to empower learners and educators. We also were able to gain some clues and insights to unpack GCED through good practices and pedagogical know-hows. Before moving on to the final remarks, I would like to share some of the highlights of the past 2 days from the conference.
teaching that the same language they used to take away my freedom, it touches on a large component of our project and 숙제로 내어줍니다. 인플루언서로서 활동해보는 그런 기회도 제공합니다. 대표적인 건 이제 개념을 학습하는데 locating someone, but there has been a shift and there has been movement, right? We are trying to create change, not completely different. Innovative, I would say, approach.
I hope all of you enjoyed all the inspiring speeches and discussions over the last 2 days. Now, we move on to the closing remarks. I would like to invite Mr. Christopher Kessel, Director of the Division for Peace and Sustainable Development at UNESCO in Paris. Please welcome Mr. Kessel.
Thank you. Wow, that video, I said to colleagues at the table, I feel exhausted just watching that. We really covered a lot of ground over the last couple of days. But more importantly, I think we all collectively managed to unpack a lot when it comes to global citizenship education, which of course was the theme and the purpose of this meeting. Everybody in this room, I would say, first of all, thank you for your generosity in sharing your experiences, showing your humility, admitting what we don't know, talking about the challenges that we have, the frustrations that we experience, but also the successes that we're starting to see. I have to say that having been away from the engagement in global citizenship education directly for quite some time, it's been really fascinating to come back to it and discover how far things have progressed. It's really impressive, very exciting. It's wonderful in particular to hear so many examples of how countries are integrating global citizenship education. They're not talking about it, they're actually doing it. They're integrating GCED into their curricula, they're training teachers, they're changing their policies, and most importantly, they're making an impact in terms of what the mindsets and the lives of learners around the world. And it's been really a great inspiration and motivation for me, and I think for pretty much everybody in the room. So first and foremost, a big thank you to all of you, and then of course also to APSEU for organizing such a wonderful event where I think everybody here feels like they had an amazing opportunity to participate and engage. So let's have a round of applause for APSEU. And then really just to conclude by saying a huge thanks to everybody, all of you in particular. As I said, I'm humbled by how much I learned over the last couple of days, and I'll be sharing a lot when I get back to Paris with my colleagues at UNESCO. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much for your words, Mr. Kessel. Now, I would like to invite our last speaker of the conference, Mr. Hyunmook Lim, Director of APSEU. Mr. Lim, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you all speakers, panelists, moderators, and the audiences for your participation and contribution. I'm sure that through this year's conference, yesterday and today, you have been able to share views and experiences, ideas and inspirations. Personally, I also have been encouraged and inspired by your talks, stories, and most importantly, your emotions. Yes, yesterday, we are meeting here face to face, first time in 4 years after COVID-19. And this in-person meeting means a lot for all of us. We talked about empathy yesterday, and we know very well, eye-to-eye contact is crucial for empathy. In my opening remarks, I mentioned that this conference has been well established as an important platform for sharing and discussing and reflecting important issues and experiences and ideas. In this meeting hall and also in the online space, we have multiple GCED stakeholders gathering together to learn from each other and encourage and inspire each other. I am thankful to you all, teachers, researchers, policymakers, civil society practitioners, and youth leaders for sharing your insights, your smiles, and your warm heart, and your commitment to making our education more relevant and better for our communities, our nations, and our world, and the planet. Yesterday and today, we have all listened to all the heartening stories of practicing GCED in schools and communities and bring about real impact. Many great attempts and initiatives and practices are already underway in many places. I pay my respect and humble compliments to these great teachers and practitioners. But as I said yesterday, the reality today is going in an opposite direction, which means that we have to redouble our efforts, or we have to work more effectively or strategically. In this regard, let me remind that the UNESCO is about to adopt the revised recommendation on education for peace, human rights, and international understanding. I'm sure that once this revised recommendation is formally adopted next month, it will give us a great deal of momentum. It will give us an opportunity to convince our Minister of Education, high-level policymakers, and our community leaders of the power of GCED, of the necessity for GCED in this rapidly changing and increasingly uncertain and dangerous world. So we must seize this opportunity to mobilize political will and sensitize high-level policymakers for their interest and support for GCED and other forms of transformative education. With this call for our joint action, I conclude this year's conference on GCED. Thank you all, the speakers, moderators, panelists, and the audience for your contribution and participation. Thanks to our partners, Minister of Education, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course, UNESCO. I also thank the interpreters and the professional organizing team for the smooth running of this conference. Last but not least, I thank my special thanks to my colleagues for their hard work to prepare for this conference and to run this event. Please join me in appreciating my colleagues. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you again in next year's conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. This comes to the end of the 8th International Conference on Global Citizenship Education. You can also watch the sessions again on the conference YouTube channel. I would also like to inform you that the certificate application form for registered participants will be sent with the appreciation letter. Please fill out the form if you would like to receive one. Lastly, please leave your valuable feedback through the post-conference survey. We'd love to hear from you about any improvements. Once again, We thank you very much, each one of you, for your active participation from all over the world. We wish you all the best, and please stay safe and well. We will see you again at the next conference. Thank you.